Welcome to the Children's Tradition Podcast, where we introduce families to the poetic life. Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Foss. I'm here with my lovely wife, Amanda Foss, and we're really excited to be joined with a special guest today, Mr. Anthony Coafield. He's the owner of Living Books Press, and someone I know I'm really excited to talk with. I know you are as well. So, Mr. Coafield, thank you so much for hopping on.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's an honor.
Absolutely. I feel like it's been a long-awaited conversation because I know Amanda, I just become kind of more aware of your work. And Amanda was telling me, hey, you got to do some research and we got to have Anthony on this semester. So I'm so glad we were able to make the time work.
Yeah, I know a lot of the children's tradition families are using the resources you provide. You also, of course, provide the ability to print the children's tradition because we currently only sell the digital version. So I'm just so grateful for the partnership that you've offered to us in this. And I know a lot of the families who use the curriculum and maybe those just interested in classical education and Charlotte Mason education in general are going to be really blessed to hear from you.
Thank you very much. It's a community that I'm part of doing the Charlotte Mason and Living Book thing. So I'm glad that I can help other people out that are trying to do this great style.
Well, I'd love to kind of open up with a question that's going to be somewhat, I guess, a little bit more biographical. I'd love to kind of just even hear sort of your history, maybe with homeschooling, and then maybe connecting that to Living Books Press and what was the origin of all of that?
Yeah. So we were one of the lucky families who always wanted to homeschool from when our kids were a bit younger. So it wasn't sort of we're pulling our kid out and we got to work out what we're doing now. I had a few years to sort of learn about homeschooling. I'd only ever met one homeschooling family before where I am. And when a person who doesn't homeschool thinks of a homeschooling family, that's the sort of family they're thinking of. They were rather odd, shall we say. And so I was sort of the thought, a homeschooled kid's odd because only odd people homeschool their kids or because they're homeschooled. And there was no option for homeschooled kids not to be odd. But then we saw schools having, 30 kids in a grade with one teacher. And particularly in the younger years, the abilities can be several years apart, even though they're all 5 or whatever age they are. And we just wanted to nurture our kids' creativity and individuality and give them that space to ask questions and not just be having to sit at a desk for 6 hours a day. And so we thought, just till year 3, we'll probably try to homeschool. And then we loved it. So I did a lot of research in different homeschooling styles, those wonderful online quizzes of what type of homeschooler are you, and just answered them all, and it would come up with Charlotte Mason, eclectic, and then classical. And so I was like, okay, I need to look into this Charlotte Mason thing. And there was a lot in there about books, which are living books. That's my thing. I'd never heard of the concept of a living book before, but it really spoke to me. When I moved house at the age of 20, I had enough for a family of 4, and it was pretty much all books. So I've always been a huge reader, always loved books. And I actually had a head injury when I was 16, which forced me to drop out of school and gave me a fair few memory issues. And I found that the main thing I could remember was things that I'd read in a book. If I'd connected emotionally with something, it seemed like it just had those extra connections to hold on to. And so I thought, well, if we can do our education through stories, how much more powerful will that be? Because you're not just getting the facts, you're actually getting something tangible and emotional to connect it to. And so for that reason, it especially resonated with what I wanted to do. And so we started doing our living book homeschooling and haven't really looked back.
Yeah. Wow, so we talk a lot around here about what is called the poetic mode of learning, which is exactly what you just described, right? That filling of the imagination and the memory with stories and nature and embodied experiences because they will stick in the memory so much better. And that is very fascinating to me that because of your unique experience, having had a brain injury, that you would know firsthand, like tangibly, what things the brain will more easily retain versus more easily lose. So that is just a profound and helpful testimony, I think, for people to hear, because we can talk about this in a philosophical sense of like, oh, this is the most important thing. The way things will stay in your child's memory is that deep soul formation that comes through stories. But I mean, you get to point to that from a different level. So then how did that obviously you ended up doing homeschooling, and then how did that, or was that the connection that then birthed into Living Books Press?
So there's some wonderful mums over here that have done homeschooling before me that I found online, and they'd Australianized some of the curricula. And so I was using their book list, but a lot of the books were out of print. There was one that I didn't find available for 3 years after I started homeschooling, was searching all the time. And when I did see some, they were several weeks worth of income to grab them. And so I thought, this is a wonderful learning style, but this massive barrier to entry is people not being able to get the books. Or else I'd see on the forums people saying, what's a good copy? I'm so overwhelmed. There's so many possible versions. How can I get one that's affordable but also decent? And so I didn't have the confidence to try and advise people on how to homeschool better because I didn't have that experience. But I thought, if I can take away this barrier to entry, then it's my way of paying forward what all these other people have done, putting together curricula and book lists, or Australianizing the American book lists. And so I started tracking down rights holders, searching cemetery indexes to find out who their heirs would be and that type of thing, to make some books more available, and released my first few, and then got requests from other people for more books, and just haven't stopped.
Yeah.
So
I remember, yeah.
What I was just going to say, it seems like something that was a passions project of yours, something that you loved, right? You participated with, you experienced, now became really like a full-fledged business?
Yeah, I fell into business. I wasn't planning to have a business. We had owned a musical instrument shop, and we were importing some guitars and all that kind of thing, and I had a teaching school of about 400 students that we were managing each week. But we were partners with the in-laws, and they were wanting to start to pull back. We had young kids, and it was an hour drive each way up to the shop. And so we sold it to one of our employees, and I was just feeling kind of useless, not able to do much. I actually had one of the kids jump on my back, and then I had a reaction to the pain meds they gave me, and ended up with hepatitis. And so I was in bed having to make sure I didn't do too much physical activity. And my poor wife was out hand digging garlic beds because we've got a bit of a farm here and we didn't have a tractor yet. So that's when I actually did the Charlotte Mason volumes. I just went, okay, people have been asking for these forever. I will not feel useless if I'm actually doing something that will benefit others. And got in and did those, and haven't really looked back since. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So can you tell people, for those who maybe are less familiar with Charlotte Mason, could you explain what is meant by a living book? Because this is a term we often use in the Charlotte Mason world, more so than the classical world, right? Classical will tend to emphasize more like time-tested books, old books, things like traditional literature. But in Charlotte Mason speak, we call that a living book. So what is that? What is a living book? What makes it living?
To me, a living book is a tool. It's a really versatile tool that we can use to get knowledge across to our children. They're usually written by someone who is passionate about the subject and knowledgeable about it. There's been so many things that I don't really care about, but you start talking to somebody who knows about it and loves it, and no matter what it is, it becomes fascinating, whether it's stamp collecting and you're learning about weird little imprints or miscuts, and just anything that someone is passionate about can become really interesting. So they're a book that's wonderfully written by someone who loves the subject and just often narrative in form, and just gets it's that spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine of the learning go down. You often don't even realize that you're learning a lot of time when you're reading a well-written book.
That's a great image, a spoonful that helps the medicine go down. For sure. Those facts are clothed in an idea.
That's it. They're full of wonderful ideas. Charlotte Mason has a great saying that I'm going to butcher, but it's not necessarily about how much the kid knows, but how much they care, like in our education. I look back at my schooling, most of what I use now, I didn't learn in school. I forgot most of the things and had to relearn it now because you cram for the exam and then it's gone, or you don't use it and it's gone. But the thing that really benefited me was the things that I found interest in, and getting that foundation of a broad base of knowledge about all different things, even if it just teaches you how much you don't know and how different other people's lives are to your own. So you have that humility. It gives you that passion for learning. And that is, I think, what sets us up for later in life. We look at our kids and they're likely to have 3 or 4 different careers, the way that times are changing so quickly and jobs are changing. So that ability to learn and to have creative ideas, I think, in this age of AI is what is really going to set our kids up for success in life.
So if something's a living book, fundamentally, then that means it possesses something that's alive, right? So then it has power to renew, it has power to restore, it has power to transform. So fundamentally, it can't be something that's fragmented. It can't be necessarily something that's analytical. So a textbook we wouldn't necessarily quantify and say this is a living book, because necessarily it's bullet points, it's broken up into, just like I said, bullet point type of definitions, incredibly abstract. So this is something, so a living book, would it be accurate to say a living book is something that's incarnational, something that's embodied, something that properly cultivates the imaginative sort of sight?
Absolutely. It captures the kids' imagination. It shows them different worlds. It just makes the subject come alive for them, as only a book or a good story really can. I mean, look at Jesus. Some people would say that he was telling lies because the stories didn't happen, if they want to be really particular. But a good story can portray so much more truth than the facts can, the bare facts, I believe.
And why would you say this is important, really a must for children? I mean, because we talk about this, us, of course, who are in the classical world, we talk about, stories and giving, obviously, whether it's the good books in preparation for the great books, we talk about a lot of that with the children's tradition. It's really kind of the premise and the foundation of how it works within the poetic mode. But why is a living book essential? Why is this especially important for really the formative years of a child?
I think today you look at how our school curriculums go, and they're cutting back so much on the arts and all those things that sort of add the color and the vibrancy to life. And it's becoming so much more about the science, the maths, the other things. And I mean, I love those subjects. I was such a total science and maths nerd. I'm not putting those down at all. But we lose so much if we are not embracing beautiful stories. We lose that ability to see the world through different perspectives, to walk a mile in other people's shoes, to see that our normal isn't necessarily normal for everybody. We all have different lives. And if you think differently to me, there's probably a reason for that based on your experiences or what you've been brought up. And I can stop and listen to what you have to say. And I can, even if I don't end up agreeing with you, I'll be a better person for having heard what you have to say and understanding that you think what you think for a reason. And I think stories are a wonderful way to give us these different worlds and to understand things in a whole new way. Reading Our Island Story, I sympathize with one political group as we're getting into the War of the Roses and all that kind of thing. And then you read The Children of the New Forest, which is the kids of one of the nobles, and he sympathized with the other side. And I'm like, well, I can see I'm sympathizing with these kids who are the total different side to what I would have been on during that time. But you see that the world isn't necessarily black and white oftentimes, I think, with a well-written story. And that's a wonderful thing. I think sometimes we sanitize everything so much that kids don't have to think stuff through. It's obvious what's right and wrong in a lot of the entertainment that comes out these days. But life is complex, life is messy, and teaching our kids to be able to sit back and look at all the different sides is such an important thing these days, particularly with the polarization of our whole society.
Right. It's sort of really a proverbial way of seeing reality, right? Which is through the lens of wisdom, right? Rather than reducing everything to some sense of, right, didacticism, of, right, just kind of moral, right, just this moral black and white paradigm. And there's much more. And C.S. Lewis has that great quote where he says, through literature, I can see through a multitude of eyes, right? And then I actually see through my own properly. And I had that same very similar experience, right? As my world, I came very late to reading literature, but as I started to introduce, as I started to immerse myself, I should say, within it, I found my soul, not only my sight, but my soul, my loves, and my ability, my capacity to love, really beginning to transform as I really begin to enter into these worlds. And again, not reducing them merely to ideologies, but actually type of worlds to enter into and to behold and experience.
Definitely. One of my guilty pleasures is detective novels. I just love the pulpy detective novels. But there's Walter Mosley wrote some, and the protagonist is an African-American gentleman in sort of late 1940s, 1950s LA. And I mean, I'm a white, upper middle class growing up. Such a different world to the one I lived in, and so many different struggles. And so for me, I just loved getting to experience a world so different to my own. And that reminder to just, my world isn't everybody's world, is been so valuable to me as I've interacted with different people.
Charlotte Mason has that quote that imagination has I forget what exact word, but the possibility of magical expansion, right? That the imagination is what expands us. And I really think exactly like Patrick is saying, and you're saying, there's this sense of which it's expanding your whole soul, because you get to have those experiences that cause you to look beyond yourself. And then even then you see yourself more clearly, and see
That's
the world more clearly.
And it's amazing when you come across those people. You know, we've come across people who maybe we wouldn't look at and say they're maybe the most articulated people. They're maybe then not even the most in terms of what we refer to as academic credibility of intelligence. But because they're immersed in these living stories, they're whole souled people. And you feel that they're very holistic. Their love is very deep. Their love is very caring. There's a warmness to them that we have found. And I find, like I said, because there's something about, because these type, again, when something is alive and you participate with that story, you become, in other words, entrenched in that and become more alive yourself. And it's somewhat contagious in that sense. And you feel that, I find, when you interact with other people. That's what I love about getting to do this, particularly with the children's tradition, and talking to other people just like yourself who are invested into this. You feel that sense of, again, kindred spirit, yes, but a sense that there's a love that they have that's just much deeper because, like I said, they're whole soul people.
Absolutely. One of the greatest things about what I get to do is the amazing people I get to meet. I have the most lovely customer base, so kind and supportive. Just after one of my big sales 2 years ago, my 13-year-old cut his thumb off on the table saw. And it was right when I was getting a whole pile of customer service stuff if the distributor had shipped a book wrong or a book was taking a while to arrive. And so I just made a post saying, you know, I may take a few extra days getting back to you because my wife's up in hospital with my son. And I still to this day get people just, hey, I've been thinking about you and your son, just wanted to check in, you know, how your son's doing, or you've been in our prayers. Or the outpouring of love and support has been amazing. So getting book people really do, I think, have the biggest hearts, and they're so kind. And the other side is the children of authors, when I'm searching things out, are absolutely fascinating. I think authors already walk to the beat of a different drum, and they really allow that freedom in their kids. One gentleman I got the rights off was the first person to solo circumnavigate the world 3 times in a row. He can barely sign his signature because his hands are so torn up from holding onto the ropes and that type of thing. Another lady has massive sculptures all over our nation's capital, Canberra, that she's welded together. She does all styles of art, loves art. You go to her place, and while she'd never heard of Charlotte Mason, it was a Charlotte Mason haven. Massive dresser, and you pull out one drawer and it's all shells. The next one is all bones. The next one all seed pods and the works. It just eclectic art all over the walls. It was just wonderful. And then her brother was the head of science at Sydney Uni and now has a part, he owns a company that makes a part that's in almost every mobile phone. But he just loves science. So when we updated his mum's book, he went through every page, and for months he's sending me new research articles. And I mean, there's no way it's worth his time for the royalties he's going to get to do this, but he just loves knowledge and wants to make sure that he's passing on the correct knowledge and the best knowledge possible. Mm-hmm. And it's just been so much fun meeting these different people who, love life and learning.
Yeah.
Wow, those are beautiful examples. I love hearing about just real people just living life in this creative,
who love real things.
Yeah, love knowledge, love real things. Because, like you said, in a world that is just on the fast track towards artificiality and sensationalism, it gives hope that we don't all have to choose that path. We can, in fact, live these lives that are rooted in reality, where we love good stories, where we learn through books and getting outside and all these things, and that you can be a person who is creative and loving and all of those things and don't have to get trapped by the machine, so to speak, on all of it.
That's it. And with living books, oftentimes, I'm not sure how classical education does it a lot, but with Charlotte Mason, you're more asking the child what they know rather than asking them questions to try and figure out something they don't know.
Yes.
And so they're telling you what they've gotten from the book. And there's not necessarily a right and a wrong oftentimes, because they're sharing what they have gotten from it. And that can reveal so much about them. But it also makes learning so much more open-ended and more of a journey than these are the answers that you need to memorize and you will get there. And I think we lose so much open-endedness in every part of our lives now. Kids' play is so seldom open-ended and free. The learning is seldom open-ended. We've got a neighbor just up the road, has a beautiful swimming pool. the kids are over here every afternoon in our dam because they can take kayaks out. They're all tipping the kayak over and trying to see if they can all stand up on it or wrestling. Or we had a 18-foot jetty wash up in the floods one time. So we brought that up, and that's just floating in the middle of there, and they all run along there and wrestle. It's just completely open-ended, and kids, I think, need that kind of creativity and fun, and it's so much more beneficial than the structured, sterile life that they can have.
So true. I think one of the kind of the falls of modern man is our ability to administer, we think, just the right formula, right, and the right technique and the right system. And especially we do that with education. Not that we don't have any sense of structure, not that there's not sense that we're saying organization is bad. We're not saying that, right? But there's this over sense of, again, the utilitarian spirit of the very factory machinist approach is so interwoven. And like I said, it's so much of the air we breathe and the water we drink that we don't even realize that we're doing it. But it becomes so much of the norm. But you're right, it's very much depersonalizing and removes that sense of organic and what we would say organic, but really the poetic mode and poetic knowledge of actually how we learn about things and grow in our understanding of experience.
That's it. So I've got 3 boys. We started schooling each of them at the age of 6. And my oldest, he just absolute dream, is dyslexic, so he struggled to get the grasp of reading for a little while. But when his younger brother turned 6, I was so excited to start schooling them together, because I this will be so, kill 2 birds, 1 stone. It was obvious after half an hour this was not going to work, because his younger brother has some pretty bad verbal comprehension issues. And we've worked a lot on that, getting through it, but for him, we've had to simplify a lot of his books. So find ones with more pictures. A lot of the early level books that I've reprinted will have images from 3 or 4 different original printings, just to have as many in there, because that was an extra thing for him to tie that onto. And I know Charlotte Mason wasn't huge for images. She wanted the kids to build them herself. But hey, if I'm making the book for my kid, I can do what I like. and it helped him. And I think one of the things with using books is that as long as you know the purpose of that book, what you're trying to use it to get across, if that particular tool isn't working for one particular kid, you can find another tool that will accomplish that purpose. Mm-hmm. So for that second son, I had to find other books that would teach him the same basic concepts and take him on that same overall journey, just in a different way. And then my third son came along, who's the most terrifying combination of the 2. I always joke that he's either going to rule the world. Well, he's going to rule the world and he's going to be in jail. Just, which order they happen is the only thing I'm going to work out yet. But so with him, we have to be careful to make sure that there's no competition between him and his older brother, because we don't want the middle son feeling that he's not very smart, because he's so gifted in so many other areas. So I try to make sure they have different books, just so there's not that, hey, well, I read that last year and I'm younger than you type of thing that brothers can do sometimes if they're wanting to be competitive, especially when you're a little brother trying to prove yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so and living books make that so much easier, I think, if you know what the purpose is. You can switch and change the tool for whatever is being done. Mm-hmm.
So obviously we're all bookish people here. You're a publisher where we have a curriculum based off of books. But what would you say from your experience having been homeschooling in a very literary approach? What might be some of the pitfalls or I don't know if dangers is too strong of a word, but the pitfalls that we might fall into because we are orienting ourselves on a bookish education?
Wow. As long as you're organized and know what you're needing to get across, I can't see a lot of them. It's such a wonderful part of a well-rounded education that any pitfalls I'd have with homeschooling using a living book education would be more just any potential pitfalls of homeschooling, no matter what style you're using. Right. I think sometimes if you're not focused, you could maybe fall a bit behind on the science, particularly since a lot of these curriculums can be using older books where not all the knowledge isn't necessarily the same as current days. But there's a lot that you and I would have learnt in school that is obsolete knowledge now as well. That half-life of knowledge is something I talk to my children about often. Because in medical school, I'll often say half the procedures that we teach you this year are not going to be the ones that you're going to use when you finish. We just don't know which half they are, because there will be new knowledge come about, better ways of doing things. And so I think where that could be a negative if you don't address it, actually becomes quite a positive, because it teaches a bit of humility in the knowledge that we have, that things do change. We do find out better ways to do things. We find out that Pluto is no longer a planet. All these other things, we discover new elements and different parts of the world. And so it just allows us to, if we hear something new, make sure we go and look into it, rather than saying, no, this is what I learned, I am right, because we're aware that knowledge does have a half-life. So if the book is more teaching us to care and be passionate about nature or science or whatever part it is, we can build on top of that easily if we need that knowledge for our, careers or whatever else, because we've got that love of it. So I think it can be a positive or a negative depending on how it's dealt with in the homeschool.
In terms of your experience, and to kind of even build off that question, to flesh it out even more, is there, like I said, in your experience, is there an improper way to engage these living books? Like, so we agree on the content, right? We're doing it, but we're actually not engaging with it the way that we should be. What would you say could be maybe those, like I said, improper ways of engaging them?
So one of the secrets to using living books that Charlotte Mason used was a concept called narration. And it's amazing. I'll often have articles come off my newsfeed talk about how this is such a great way of learning. But basically what you do after the child reads it is you get them to tell it back to you. It's like when they watch an episode of a trashy TV show or something and they're so excited they can't wait to tell you all about it. And they can do it when it's that. And sometimes when they've been reading one of these books, they're like, I don't know. And you just sometimes you need to work a bit to get them started telling things back, but then they'll go nuts, and then it really helps them to re-solidify it in their minds. It's like, I'm probably going to say his name wrong, but Feynman says the professor would say that to learn something properly, teach it to somebody else. And that's essentially what we're doing with narration. We're getting them to teach us what they've gotten from whatever they've read. And I think if we don't do that, we're losing a huge amount of opportunity to both help the knowledge sink into our kids, but also it helps them to care more, I think, when they're telling it back and to really comprehend it more. Right. So I think if we're not doing that, we're letting our kids down.
Right. One of the things that has been encouraging with just the whole classical renewal is more and more families coming in, and not just particularly mothers and females excited about this, but seeing more dads wanting to come in, showing an interest. So we run a tutorial program, and it's been really encouraging to just see more fathers, just to show a sense of like an inquiry kind of type of spirit, to say, hey, what is this, rather than maybe just deferring and just saying, okay, hey, to the wife, to the spouse, hey, you take care of that, right? And you sort of handle that, and I'll just kind of check off. But they actually are showing some level of, hey, I actually want to participate in this, rather than maybe just sort of an overseeing site, right? Which, of course, we would say fathers, that's a responsibility of the father. But I'd love to just hear from you. What are ways that fathers can engage even more? Maybe just some practical suggestions of how fathers can engage with their children with regards to education.
Yeah, that's a great question. I am extremely fortunate in that I can do the publishing around my kids whenever I need to, and seldom have deadlines that I need to sort of sit and forsake all else to accomplish. So I'm not necessarily the best person to answer this, because I haven't had to try and juggle it with a 9 to 5 working outside the home. But one easy way, often the kids will be reading a literature type of book. And even if you just make that your bedtime reading with them, getting to sit down and spend that time. Because, there's the benefit of the learning, but there's the benefit of just being with your kids, sharing those things. I look back at some of my fondest memories with my grandmother, and it was her reading different stories to me. And they might just be, the old Dr. Seuss family of books, or the Diggingest Dog, or something simple like that. But just the sitting there with her gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling here 40 years later. And so building that closeness with our kids, even if it's just reading them one of their literature books at night, is so or even if it's not one of their school books, just spend some time reading with your kids and doing those things. Get them to tell their stuff back to you. Take an interest in learning along with them. Getting them to teach you is a fantastic way, because it's them getting to narrate, but they feel useful because they're getting to share this knowledge and teach you something. And just take interest in what they're wanting to share.
Yeah, that makes me think of sort of a forewarning. We just did a book study on Frankenstein, and early on in Frankenstein's adolescence, he's trying to share what he's passionate and excited about with his father, and his father just somewhat dismisses it and ignores it. And it's not that the son lost interest in that thing; he just didn't now share that interest with his father. And the father actually lost out on it, and then it led to a lot of other vices that begin
A
to
lot of other bad father-son
very bad.
relationships.
Yes, a very distorted, right, parental type of relationship. But I like that idea of taking an interest. And what I even encourage fathers who are just coming into this, because I understand that. I was one of those fathers too, sort of feeling almost kind of late to the game and coming in. But I said, really, the first thing you can do, I love the interest point, I love, but also just be present. Learn how to be present and to be present well with that sense of just engagement and being in tune, right, to what your children are, and reading whatever your capacity and time permits. How that may look for a certain father may look like this over here. And what looks for like another father, it's going to look like this or there. Wherever you start, but find that starting place, wherever it is, whatever book that is, and just begin reading at some point to your children.
Exactly. That's it. 100%.
Well, can you just share, as we're wrapping this up, can you share about Living Books Press, just some of the books you have available that our families might be interested to hear? I know you said you have some that have not yet been in print, but are about to go to press. So anything you would like to share about Living Books Press, we would love for everyone to hear.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if anybody's looking for any books in particular, please get in touch. Almost everything I do comes from requests that people have made. So I'm just a homeschooling parent and just trying to do my part to pay forward the help I get and make it easier to use all these books. So you can find me at livingbookpress.com. Because of my learning difficulties, I have to make copious notes and I work in batches because otherwise I forget where I'm at or how to do a certain section of a book. And I'm starting to outsource some more. But I've got something like 200 books just waiting for me to get covers finished. So there's a lot there that's in line, and I may be able to push something forward pretty quickly for you if it's what you're looking for. And I just do this to try and help out. So if there's anything I can do, please let me know.
Well, we'll definitely make sure to share that in the show notes below. One final question for you, and that is, what are just some of your favorite living books?
Some of my favorite living books. I love Richard Halliburton's books of marvels. The wanderlust that I get as I look at those. If you're not familiar with him, he died in his early 40s, but he was one of the big first travel journalists. He would send home his letters. He crossed the Alps on an elephant and wrote home about it. He took him and a friend who was a pilot, went around the world, and he sort of recorded his journey for adults in newspaper articles and the like, and then wrote a couple of books for kids, taking them through different places. So he hid in the Taj Mahal and explored it at night, and he describes what that was like. Or he climbed Mount Fuji and did all these fascinating things. He died trying to sail a Chinese junk from China to America. They hit a storm.
If somebody ever tells me, hey, I'm an adventurous, I just want to be like, read this.
Exactly. He was absolutely fascinating, but it just makes you want to see the world and all those sorts of places. So I love those. There's a pair of books I republished, Tiger in the Bush and Devil's Hill. They're set down in Tasmania, which is a little island off the bottom of Australia. They both won the Australian Children's Book of the Year. And it follows a family who live in a valley that's off the maps. So dad just found this land and he's built himself a shack. They have to take everything on this wire across a raging river. They've got 2 wires and they have to shuffle sideways. So they've got little grooves on the bottom of their shoes that have worn in from doing that. And it's about him learning responsibility and growing up basically in this fantastic environment that's so different to anything I know, but the lessons in there are fantastic for anybody. And they sort of focus on characters who may not necessarily have the book smarts, but they've got the they can look at the weather and understand what's happening, and they can look out in nature and see what's going on and how to track the animals and do whatever else. So it's that very valuable real knowledge that we relied on for so long. So they're a lot of fun. I love those.
Well, and speaking of the outdoors and nature, I want to plug the fact that you have color printed editions of the Handbook of Nature Study, where you have it broken up into much more reasonable volumes by topic. And that is just a huge resource that I love. You have the Burgess books that you have, again, with the color images. Personally, I have all of your Burgess books with the pictures that are the updated pictures, but then I get prints of the paintings, so my kids can still see the paintings, but they're getting to see both, because getting to see those real pictures you have put in I think it just really helps them with identification and things like that. And those are just a fantastic resource. And kind of to what you were saying about earlier with science, it just makes me think how in the Charlotte Mason method, the pair of the thing that completes living books is nature. Right. And so it's that handbook of nature study, that getting out in the real world, that ultimately refines and creates a complete curriculum with living literature together, that then a much more robust education in the long run, I think, when those things go together. And you have such great resources on that.
Oh, thank you. I had the old phone book for the Handbook of Nature Study, and I just never used it. The dual column, small writing, and the weight of it, just wasn't practical. And so for me, I wanted to have something that had some new images, but also I could just... Often people have a particular subject they're trying to study each term, so you can just take that volume with you out as you're going about, and just makes it much more practical and more likely to be used. I found for myself, at least.
And you also printed recently the Master Owl Till Glass, which I will just bring that one up because that one, I'm pretty sure nobody can find that anywhere else. I found one copy that is very old. Like, I think it's like a 200-year-old copy. I did buy it because I needed it so badly writing the curriculum. I needed to know what I was putting in the curriculum. So I bought this very old copy, but literally the front cover actually came off because it's so fragile. And so I was sitting there with my fourth grader. She's now fifth grade, but at the time with her, just very carefully reading it, like, nobody touch it, nobody move. We don't want to breathe on it. It might like disintegrate in our hands. So when you then came out with your print of it, I was so thankful to be like, hey, here's a copy you can, take with you in the car, and I'm not going to be worried about it. And so that's a great one as well.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad. That's right. I used to have people apologize for buying a secondhand copy of a book that they found. I'm like, no, I love book hunting. I love searching for things. I remember that feeling of like, I was squealing and jumping up and down in this thrift shop because I found for $2 this book that was going to cost me a week's wages otherwise. I was thrilled.
Yeah.
I never want to take that joy of the hunt away from anybody. But I love being a fail-safe that if you can't find some beautiful old copies or whatever else, you can get a decent copy easily shipped to you at an affordable price. So I can just be a safety net there if you can't find some nice old ones.
Yeah. And if you're book hoarders like us, you probably want both. You probably want your pretty used copies. You probably also want the copies to hand the kids in the car. So.
Very true. Very true. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for coming on to just talk about your love and your passion of Living Books. And like I said, we'll definitely make sure to share more about Living Books Press, and would love to just keep the conversation going. We'll have to have you come back on so we could talk about maybe a specific book sometime. I think that'd be a really just an enjoyable and delightful conversation to have with you sometime in the future.
I'd love that. Sounds great.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again so much to our audience, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.